Three French Hens, written by Tuesday Savage, produced by Trouble Twins Publishing. Chapter 1. Hero Joiglee pulled his van onto a narrow dirt road that twisted through snow-covered farmland, the van rattling over every frozen bump and dropping into every pothole no matter how hard he tried to avoid them. His GPS cheerfully announced, "Arriving at your destination in 500 feet. Though Hero's destination looked less like a farm and more like the set of a low-budget horror movie. The barn at the end of the road leaned precariously to one side, its roof patched with mismatched sheets of tin. Nearby, a sagging wire fence barely contained a ragtag assortment of animals, a few goats, a muddy pig, and what Hero hoped was just a very large dog lurking in the shadows. "Maybe I should have just called Roy," Hero muttered, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. But the memory of Thumpy, the booze-loving partridge, and the flyaway turtle doves made him think otherwise. He parked the van near the barn as he'd been instructed over the phone, beeped the horn and stepped out, the frigid wind biting through his coat. He blew on his hands and wished he'd worn a hat. A lone rooster crowed somewhere off in the distance, the sound echoing across the desolate landscape. "Hello?" Hero called, his voice carrying across the empty yard. The barn door creaked open, and a wiry man with a scruffy beard and a cigarette dangling from his lips stepped out. He wore a heavy coat with the kind of grime that only years of neglect could achieve. "You Joiglee?" the man asked, squinting at Hero. "That's me," Hero replied, forcing a smile, his second thoughts on this arrangement swiftly turning to third and fourth thoughts. But he was here now, and there was no time to change his mind. He was on a tight schedule. "I'm here about the hens. You had an ad online? 3 French hens for sale?" The man snorted, taking a drag from his cigarette. "Yeah, they're in the back. Follow me." Hero hesitated, but decided he'd come too far to back out now. He followed the man into the barn, ducking under a low-hanging beam. The interior smelled like damp hay, at least a century of poop, sour feed, and old wood, and the dim light filtering through the cracks in the walls did little to dispel the gloom. A couple of dim 40-watt bulbs flickered fitfully, and Hero had to dodge them to avoid smacking his head on them. He followed the man through a veritable maze of pens and narrow passageways to the far end of the barn. In the corner, a wire cage held 3 large black and rust-colored birds with striking red combs. They strutted back and forth, their movements quick and purposeful, and if Hero was honest, a little aggressive. "See, French hens," the man said, gesturing to the birds. "Real fancy, perfect for your party thing." Hero frowned. He wasn't an expert, but something about the hens seemed off. They were bigger than he'd expected, their beady eyes sharper, almost calculating. "They look active," Hero said carefully. "Just healthy," the man replied with a toothy grin. "You don't want no lazy birds, do ya?" "I guess not," Hero said, still uncertain. "And they're hens, right? Not roosters?" The man clapped a hand to his chest, feigning offense. "Course they're hens. You think I'd lie to ya?" Hero hesitated for another moment before sighing. He was pressed for time, and he was here, and the birds were already packaged up. He suppressed a sigh. As his mother had always said, beggars can't be choosers. He needed 3 French hens for the party. "All right, let's do it. Good choice. I guarantee you won't be disappointed by these birds. They know how to perform," the man said. Hero goggled at the man. "Really? They've done this sort of thing before? Put on a show before?" "Sure. They're old hats at entertaining. They do events practically every weekend." The man took a drag on his cigarette. "You want me to put them in the van for you?" The transaction was quick. Hero handed over the wad of cash, and the man loaded the cage into the back of the van. As he drove away, Hero glanced in the rearview mirror at the birds, which seemed to be watching him with unnerving, malevolent focus. He wished he'd thrown the cloth over them before he'd begun the long drive back into town. Their yellow dinosaur eyes were making him nervous. "It's fine," he muttered to himself. "Just a few chickens. What could possibly go wrong?" By the time Hero returned to the Aurora Quest Library basement, he was feeling more confident. The space was already set up for the Everything French Club's annual Christmas party. Bistro tables were draped with red and white checkered tablecloths, string lights twinkled overhead, and a small Eiffel Tower replica stood in the corner. "This is going to be perfect," Hero said as he unloaded the cloth-covered cage and carried it into the venue. He set it near the dessert table, where rows of eclairs and macarons sat waiting to be served. The caterer, a lanky man named Dennis, eyed the cage warily as Hero pulled the cloth back and secured the door with an extra padlock. He'd learned his lesson from little Timmy at the wedding. "What's in there?" Dennis asked, his voice tinged with suspicion. "French hens," Hero replied proudly. "A little extra authenticity for the theme." Dennis's face paled. "Birds? I don't know about this." "Relax," Hero said, waving him off. "They're harmless, completely tame." Dennis came over and lifted a corner of the cloth to see for himself. As if on cue, one of the hens lunged at the bars of the cage, letting out an angry squawk. Dennis jumped back, nearly upsetting a tray of croissants. "Harmless, huh?" he muttered, shooting Hero a skeptical look. Hero gave the cage a nervous glance. "They're just spirited. It'll be fine. It's not like I'm going to let them out." As guests began arriving, Hero busied himself with last-minute details, doing his best to ignore the occasional clattering sound coming from the cage. The hens, roosters technically, though Hero hadn't realized it yet, were growing increasingly agitated, pacing and pecking at the bars, in spite of the cloth draped over it, to help them keep calm. When the president of the Everything French Club arrived, a petite woman with an imperious air, she greeted Hero with a dazzling smile and the fakest French accent Hero had ever heard. "Mr. Joiglee, what a magnifique setup! And the hens, how charming!" "Thank you," Hero said, bowing slightly. "I think they'll really add to the ambience." "Indeed," she said, peering into the cage, "though they do seem energetic." Hero chuckled nervously. "Just a little festive excitement, nothing to worry about." If only he'd known what was coming. Chapter 2. The first sign of trouble came during Hero's welcome speech. Standing near the dessert table, Hero held a glass of sparkling cider and grinned at the assembled members of the Everything French Club. About 24 guests were scattered around the room, their laughter mingling with the soft strains of accordion music playing over the speakers. "Thank you all for coming," Hero said, raising his glass. "It's an honor to plan this year's event, and I think you'll agree it's shaping up to be a soirée worthy of Paris itself. Bon appétit." Polite applause rippled through the room as Hero stepped back, relieved to have made it through the speech without incident. Behind him, Dennis the caterer shot him a nervous glance and gestured subtly toward the cage. Hero followed Dennis's gaze and froze. One of the hens, or, rather, roosters as Dennis had pointed out to him earlier, had pressed itself against the bars, its beady eyes locked onto the dessert table like a predator sizing up its prey. It was trying to get its head through the bars. "They're fine," Hero whispered to himself, forcing a smile. Dennis muttered under his breath, "I think they're planning a breakout." Hero laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous. They're locked up tight. I put an extra lock on the cage door to prevent a mishap like last time." As if to contradict him, one of the roosters let out a blood-curdling crow that echoed through the library basement and reminded Hero of the velociraptor roar he'd heard at the reptile zoo when his mom took him when he was a kid. The sudden noise startled the guests, and a woman near the Eiffel Tower replica clutched her heart and bumped into the cardboard statue, almost knocking it over. "Are they supposed to do that?" the club president asked, her fake French accent faltering. Hero nodded quickly. "Absolutely, it's a part of their charm. Very authentic." "Could you hear the French accent?" The president tilted her head, unconvinced, but allowed herself to be distracted by a tray of hors d'oeuvres. Dennis gave him a withering look, but Hero shrugged it off. The next warning came shortly afterward, as Hero was helping Dennis refill the punch bowl. "I'm telling you," Dennis said, glancing over his shoulder, "those birds are bad news. They're freaking me out. They bit one guy when he was trying to feed it a baguette and stole a lady's drink as she was walking by." "Relax," Hero said, waving him off. "They're fine. Just a little feisty. And maybe I should have gotten some food and a water bowl for them." "Feisty?" Dennis hissed. "One of them tried to bite me through the bars, and I wasn't even close. I don't know how it got its head through the bars, but it had the longest neck I've ever seen on a chicken." Hero glanced at the cage again. The roosters were pacing back and forth like caged lions, their claws clicking against the wire floor, and they were making some kind of low cooing sound. Hiro thought, birds didn't growl, but these ones seemed to be an exception. A couple of people came over to the punch bowl, and Hiro was distracted from the threatening aura the roosters were giving off for a while, refilling mugs with punch and learning how to say a few French words. "Sacre bleu tabernacle," someone shouted over by the chicken cage. Before Hiro could respond, there was a loud crash. Hiro whipped around just in time to see one of the club members, an older gentleman wearing a beret and a festive Christmas scarf, stumbling backward into the dessert table, collapsing it to the floor with a crash. "What happened?" Hiro asked, rushing over. "That bird," the man sputtered, pointing at the cage. "It lunged at me, and it moved the cage." Hiro opened his mouth to reply, but the sight of the table silenced him. The carefully arranged rows of eclairs and macarons were scattered across the floor like edible confetti. The rooster's agitation had reached a fever pitch, and one of them launched itself at the bars, causing the cage to rattle violently. Hiro checked the cage's location. It had moved several feet, in fact. Hiro suppressed a shudder as the agitated bird squawked and lunged at the bars, clearly intent on the man in the beret. The room fell silent, all eyes on Hiro. "Well," he said weakly, "at least the cage held." It didn't hold. Moments later, as Hiro tried to calm the guests and reassure them that the roosters were safely contained, the cage gave way. Whether it was poorly constructed or sabotaged by the birds themselves, Hiro couldn't say, but the result was the same. The roosters burst free in an explosion of feathers and fury. Pandemonium erupted. One rooster bolted straight for the dessert table, scattering the remaining pastries as it hopped onto the table and flapped its wings. Another charged toward the guests, sending the club president scrambling onto a chair with a shriek. The third made a beeline for Dennis, who screamed and dived behind the punch table. "Everyone stay calm," Hiro shouted, grabbing a nearby tray and brandishing it like a shield. "I've got this." He lunged at the nearest rooster, which dodged with a speed and agility that shouldn't have been possible for a bird. The rooster retaliated with a well-aimed kick with its leg spurs, and Hiro yelped as the tray clattered to the floor as he rubbed his shin and checked for blood. "Not helpful," Dennis shouted from his hiding place. The room devolved into chaos as guests tried to evade the rampaging birds. One of the roosters landed on the Eiffel Tower replica, sending it toppling into a bowl of pâté. Another knocked over a glass of wine, the red liquid spreading like blood across the tablecloth. "Joiglee," the club president screeched. "Do something." "I'm trying," Hiro shouted back. Hiro hid behind the overturned table with Dennis and the president of the French club. "What's the plan?" Dennis asked, whacking an attacking rooster with an eclair. It wasn't the most effective weapon, but it held the rooster at bay. For now, Hiro had his phone out. "I'm calling Dixie. She'll know what to do." Chapter 3. Just as Hiro was about to make another desperate lunge for one of the roosters in an attempt to toss a tablecloth over it, the basement door swung open with a bang. "Joiglee," Dixie Helia called, her voice cutting through the chaos like a referee blowing a whistle. "What in the holly jolly heck is going on here?" Hiro froze mid-lunge, turning to see Dixie standing in the doorway, a collapsible net in one hand and a look of sheer disbelief on her face. She was wearing her usual khaki jacket, but it was unzipped to reveal a t-shirt with the slogan, "Santa Paws, Adopt, Don't Shop." The rooster took advantage of Hiro's distraction and bolted, chasing a hapless club member into the bathroom. "Dixie," Hiro exclaimed, his relief palpable. "Thank goodness you're here. The hens are roosters and they're—" "I can see that," Dixie interrupted, stepping into the room and surveying the scene. One rooster was crowing with abandon and flapping wildly on top of the overturned Eiffel Tower replica, while another was circling the punch table like a shark stalking its prey. The third had perched triumphantly on the back of a chair and was holding a woman at bay. Dixie raised an eyebrow. "Why am I not surprised you're at the center of this circus? Can you please save the sarcasm for later?" Hiro snapped, dodging a pastry thrown in his direction by a fleeing guest. Dixie smirked but unfolded her net. "All right, Joiglee, let's wrangle some birds." She gave Hiro a net. Hiro and Dixie split up, each taking a corner of the room. Dixie moved with calm efficiency, her net poised as she edged toward the rooster on the chair. Hero, on the other hand, attempted to corral the rooster near the punch table, hoping to corner the bird in the large bowl. "Don't spook it," Dixie called over her shoulder. "I'm not spooking it," Hero protested, tiptoeing toward the bird. "It's spooking me." The rooster, sensing Hero's approach, let out a piercing squawk and launched itself into the air, its claws narrowly missing Hero's head. He swooshed the net, but missed by a fraction of an inch. "Would you call that not spooking it?" Dixie asked dryly, snagging the chair bird with a practiced swoop of her net. "It wasn't spooked, it's toying with me," Hero grumbled as he ran after the fleeing rooster. Things didn't improve. After another 10 minutes of failed attempts, Hero found himself cornered near the dessert table, one rooster advancing on him with murderous intent. He'd been raked by those 2-inch spurs more than once already, and he wasn't eager for another taste of them. "Dixie!" he shouted, brandishing a half-eaten baguette as a weapon because he'd lost the net somewhere after the rooster attacked his shins with its spurs. "A little help here." "Hold on," Dixie replied, expertly depositing the first captured rooster into a sturdy portable crate. "I'm coming." The rooster lunged, and Hero swung the baguette like a sword, managing to deflect the attack but sending crumbs flying everywhere as the bun broke in half. The guests, who had mostly retreated to the edges of the room, erupted in laughter and scattered applause. "Very French Revolution," Dixie said, arriving just in time to trap the bird with her net. "Good job distracting it." "Thank you," Hero muttered, panting as Dixie secured the second rooster. "I don't know how you do this so effortlessly." "It's a gift," Dixie said, flashing him a grin. "That and years of wrangling angry geese." Hero shuddered. "I don't even want to think about that." The final rooster proved the most elusive. It darted between tables, sending wine glasses toppling and guests scrambling. At one point, it knocked over a potted plant, leaving a trail of dirt and broken ceramic in its wake. "Okay," Dixie said, her tone growing more serious. "This one's clever." "Great," Hero grumbled. "The rooster's outsmarting us. That's not embarrassing at all." Dixie shot him a look. "Focus, Joiglee. We need to corner it. You block the stairs, and I'll flush it toward the coat rack. If we can tangle it up in the coats, we can get it in a crate." Hero nodded, moving into position. Channeling his inner lion tamer, he grabbed a chair to use as a makeshift barrier, trying to ignore the looks from the guests huddled nearby. He groaned when he realized several of them had their phones out. He hoped they weren't taking video, but knew it was too much to ask. This latest disaster was sure to be the end of his new planning business, and he'd be forced to admit defeat, move back to the city, and go back to his old job of oiling fitness contestants at competitions. Dixie moved deliberately, her net at the ready. The rooster let out a low, guttural sound, a warning perhaps, and flapped its wings, scattering a pile of discarded napkins. "Easy," Dixie murmured, inching closer. The rooster hesitated, its beady eyes darting between Dixie and Hero. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it bolted, not toward the coat rack or any people, but straight for the open basement door that was ajar, thanks to an escaping club member. "Oh, no you don't," Dixie shouted, sprinting after it. "Wait for me," Hero yelled, abandoning the chair and following her up the stairs. The chase spilled into the library's main floor, where the rooster's antics caused further chaos. It startled a group of patrons who had been completely unaware of the drama happening in the basement, sent a stack of books tumbling, and even managed to scare the library cat, who bolted for the safety of the front desk. Dixie finally cornered the bird near the circulation desk, using a strategically placed book cart to block its escape. "Gotcha," she said triumphantly, scooping the rooster into her net. Hero arrived seconds later, panting and disheveled. "Please tell me that's the last one." "Last one," Dixie confirmed. With Hero on her heels, she carried it back downstairs to the waiting crate, where she secured the bird in the crate, along with its comrades. Hero slumped against the punch table, which was miraculously still standing. "I think I'm going to start a bird-free business. No more birds, ever." Dixie smirked. "You say that now, but give it a week. Chaos seems to find you, Joiglee." Hero groaned. "Why do I feel like that's not a compliment?" Dixie laughed, her voice echoing through the library's now mostly empty basement. Chapter 4. The library basement was finally calm, save for the muffled squawking of the roosters, now securely locked in their individual crates. Dixie was filling out tags attached to the crates and getting ready to take the birds out to her truck and back to the shelter. Hero, with Dennis's help, had just started gathering the broken remains of the dessert table when the sound of a police siren pierced the air outside. Dixie's head snapped up. "You've got to be kidding me," Hero groaned, running a hand down his face. "What now?" A moment later, the basement door opened again, and Officer Barry Hinkle entered. Aurora Quest's only full-time cop, Barry had a stocky build, a bristling handlebar mustache with a ridiculous soul patch that looked like he missed a spot shaving, and a perpetually annoyed expression that made him look like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Joiglee?" Barry said, his voice a mix of exasperation and resignation. "Why is it always you? This town was quiet before you showed up." Hero blinked. "What? Why are you here? I didn't call you." "No," Barry said, crossing his arms. "But someone did. A little bird told me there was a certain illegal activity happening here tonight." Dixie frowned, her hands on her hips. "Illegal activity? What are you talking about, Barry?" Barry jabbed a thumb toward the crate. "Those aren't just roosters, folks. I'm surprised you didn't realize it, Dixie. Those are fighting birds, which is illegal. There are laws against fighting birds, Joiglee, and unless I'm mistaken, you," he pointed at Hero, "brought them into town." Hero's jaw dropped. Wait. Fighting birds? I didn't know that. I thought I was buying hens, French hens for a Christmas party. 3 French hens like the Christmas song." Barry's mustache twitched as he gave Hero a skeptical look. "Sure you did. And I'm the Tooth Fairy." Dixie stepped forward, her tone sharp. "Hold on, Barry. Hero might be a magnet for disaster, but he's not a criminal. Let's figure this out before you start slapping cuffs on people." Barry sighed. "Fine, let's start with where you got these roosters, Joiglee." Hero shifted uncomfortably. From a guy outside of town. I never got his name. He had an ad online. Alcatraz, I think his handle was. Said they were hens, I swear." Barry rolled his eyes. "And did this guy seem, I don't know, trustworthy?" Hero hesitated, recalling the scruffy man, the sketchy barn, and the ominous atmosphere. Define trustworthy." "That's what I thought," Barry muttered. Before Hero could protest further, the door swung open yet again. This time, a man in a tie-dyed shirt and thick glasses barged in, a camera slung around his neck and a clipboard in hand. "Animal Welfare Alliance," the man announced, glaring at Hero. "We received a tip about illegal fighting roosters being used for entertainment purposes. Saw the video online. 47 views already. Care to explain yourself?" Hero threw his hands in the air. "Oh, come on." The next hour was a blur of accusations, paperwork, and general humiliation. Despite Dixie's efforts to help explain the situation, Barry decided to err on the side of caution and arrested Hero for possession of illegal fighting birds. "You've got to be kidding me," Hero muttered as Barry cuffed him. Procedure," Barry replied, guiding him toward the cruiser parked outside. "We'll sort this out at the station." Dixie followed them to the door, her expression a mix of frustration and sympathy. "Hang in there, Joiglee. I'll catch up with you in the morning." "Great," Hero grumbled as he was unceremoniously stuffed into the back of the cruiser. "Just great." Hero spent the night in one of Aurora Quest's 2 jail cells. To his dismay, his neighbor in the cell across from him was none other than Roy, the bird wrangler, who was nursing a black eye and ranting about being arrested for scamming tourists at a local bar. "Can you believe this?" Roy said, gesturing to the tiny cell. "They locked up Thumpy too. Poor guy didn't do nothing wrong." Hero groaned and dropped onto the single bed, burying his face in his hands. "Why am I not surprised you're involved in this?" Roy chuckled. "Heard you went looking for birds elsewhere. Guess that didn't work out so good, huh?" Hero glared at him. "You called the cops on me, didn't you?" Roy shrugged. "Might have mentioned something. Can't have people cutting into my business, and I had to trade something for a reduced sentence." "Unbelievable," Hero muttered, leaning back against the cold wall. "What's unbelievable is how many views the video has already. Heard it's gone viral." Roy chuckled. Hero's heart sank. His business was finished for sure. He may as well think about packing up and heading back to the city as soon as he got out of jail. Why did everything have to go so wrong all the time? Hero lay on his squeaky, lumpy bunk that smelled of mildew and bleach and stared at the ceiling. thinking about having to sell his house and how much work it was going to be to pack up and get out of town. He was surprised to discover how much the thought of leaving AuroraQuest hurt. He hadn't realized how much he'd come to love the town in the short time he'd lived there, but if what Roy said was true, there was no way he could stay. Not with another disaster to his name. The morning brought a surprising twist. Hero was released after the Everything French Club arrived at the station, declaring the party an unparalleled success. Apparently, they had convinced Dixie that the super-aggressive fighting roosters were not fit to be rehomed and would make better roasts than pets. The Everything French Club had turned the captured roosters into a makeshift cooking lesson, preparing coq au vin as part of the evening's festivities after everything had calmed down. "This was the best Christmas party we've ever had," the club president exclaimed as she handed Hero a plate of leftovers. "So unique, so dramatic. You're a genius, Mr. Joiglee. You must absolutely plan our next party." Hero blinked, speechless, as Barry reluctantly let him out of the cell. Dixie arrived just in time to see the scene unfold. She smirked, leaning against the doorframe. Well, looks like your chaos worked out after all once again." "Barely," Hero muttered, rubbing his wrists. He still had indents from the handcuffs. The club president turned to him with a beaming smile. "We'll be recommending your services to everyone. Expect a glowing review." Hero gave her a weak smile, his mind still reeling from the absurdity of it all. As Hero and Dixie walked out of the station together, Hero sighed. "I can't believe I got arrested, spent the night in jail, and still managed to impress the French club." Dixie laughed. "That's AuroraQuest for you. I told you, we love a good story, and Joiglee, you're a walking one." Hero groaned but couldn't help the small smile tugging at his lips. "Here's hoping the next gig is less eventful." "Don't count on it," Dixie teased, nudging him with her elbow. "Mayhem seems to stick to you like duct tape." For the first time that day, Hero laughed. If you enjoyed this story, please consider buying a copy, like, subscribe, and check the playlist for the next episode. Thanks for listening. Tuesday Savage.